I'm going to start recording. All right, so welcome everybody. I'm going to turn it right over to Doreen. I just want to mention Wolf Book Club. I just want to mention this is our third title this year with death in the title.
I know, I'm going to look for another one.
Yeah, I hope you guys will lighten up a little. And it was also, remember, Brotherhood Betrayed, which also was had a little death oriented as well. So maybe we can lighten things up, but I don't want to, pressure anyone. So Doreen, it's
what about Mary Poppins?
How about just illness? What about illness, but it doesn't necessarily end in death?
Right. I think we will regret it.
It's so funny you mentioned that. It's so funny you mentioned that. Just as I was getting ready for this, I was thinking death in Venice, death you're the death club. During COVID, we couldn't think of anything more.
I have a book on my
we don't want to scare people away. So
I have a book on my bookshelf called Death in Midsummer. I was going to look at it, see if it was appropriate.
Okay.
We can take it.
Oh my God, that's so funny.
So all yours, Doreen.
Okay, so I'm so glad to see everybody here, that we have a big group, because I think this is such a special work. And I can imagine reading it over and over. And I hope everyone enjoyed it as much as I did. So maybe we'll start the usual way and just go around in a circle. Everybody give their general opinion. And then we'll go around the second time with maybe a quote that everybody liked. And then we'll take my questions. So whoever wants to start.
Well, okay, I'll start.
Great.
I can start by being politically incorrect since we're recording this. This is Arthur Miller with Marilyn Monroe.
Lovely.
Which maybe has nothing to do with Death of a Salesman, but it certainly takes away from death.
Except that she killed herself.
She did. Well, or it was accidental, or who knows, but in relation to Death of a Salesman, I agree with Doreen. I mean, it's obviously classical. I think it endures, and I admit I perhaps know a little bit about Arthur Miller, and the picture I just showed came from a book which is called Time Bends, which was written by Arthur Miller, and it's about his whole life. And I read that some time ago, but and I've seen Death of a Salesman, I guess, at least 3 times. I guess the fascination for me with Death of a Salesman is that it's probably a story within a story within a story, and you sort of have to take them apart. It has so many different nuances in relation to social thinking, in relation to morality, in relation to violation of a relationship, in relation to how parenting affects siblings, and in relation to an economic system. And then I guess in relation to the existential searching for how do I plant a seed that somehow will grow and endure. So just to me, it's just a fascinating work, and makes you a little bit envious that somebody has that much talent. So I guess I enjoyed it. And that's it.
I can go next. I studied set design when I was in college, and also my the university house I was living in had a film society, which we used to only show films that were film versions of plays. So this was ones that we showed, and also in reading it just at the very beginning in his his italicized directions, I was astonished from the beginning at how he designed the set. mean, it's not one of these things that, you can just free to the wind, like Waiting for Godot or something. I mean, it's explicitly designed, and it's designed in such a way that it's actually masquerades the fact that it's very controlled. I mean, he's controlled the spaces and the interstices and what is really in real time and what is outside of real time, with walls you can get through and walls that you can't. I mean, it was so brilliantly conceived. And then you you read the play and you think the dialogue seems so extemporaneous, and yet it is so essential. Every line is essential. It's just struck me again, the same thing as you say, Jay. It's just how brilliant it was. Hard to get over that.
So I'll pick up on that because when you say to look for a line, I'll choose a line that I really like. A melody is heard, played upon a flute. It is small and fine, telling of placid trees in the horizon. The curtain rises. So I, like you, Robert, was just, I hadn't read this since I was in high school. And I guess at that time it didn't make this impression on me, but now I'm blown away by the orchestration of this complex, intense event. And I think the music, the way that the lyricism of how it's thought through from the musical start and interludes and finish, and with just suits, it already takes it to a different place. And then the way it's structured in time and being in two times at the same time, lines that kind of play back and forth between times. Just really that part of the whole thing I really discovered for the first time, I guess, even though I'd read it long ago. And I thought that part of it was amazing to me.
I can jump in here. I think it's a wonderful, wonderful work. And obviously Miller has got a lot of criticism of capitalism. So this play could have been a very, very obvious sledgehammer directed at the forces that destroy people. But it doesn't come across like that at all. Not at all. And what I really love this time is the poetry of the language. It's really remarkable, the long passages, the just the terrific writing, and the way Miller has made these people express themselves. It reminded me, of course, like Tennessee Williams, where you have these, again, glorious, glorious passages when people speak, as they really seldom speak in life. But here they do speak. And I just think it's a wonderful, wonderful work. Very painful in a lot of ways, but really wonderful. So
Well,
Willie kills himself. The play is alive and lives on.
well, it reminds me of a modern Greek tragedy. And that's not a completely original idea either. On this vacation, I read more fiction than I usually read. And I read The Promise by Chaim Potek, which is the second book that he writes about these two men. And they're talking about Arthur Miller. And they say Arthur Miller wrote a tragedy about a common man. And it just struck me as, we all have our own tragedies in our lives. And they're not the obvious tragedies. They're not people dying, you're not going to jail, bankruptcy, but just all the hopes and dreams and the lies that you tell yourself, to get through And I found I found it to be extraordinary the way you understand Willie. You do understand Willie. He never was a great success, but he as long as he believed he was a success, he could go on. Once he realized who he was, he couldn't go on anymore. Now, if I can lighten up the subject, since we saw the picture of Arthur Miller and Marilyn Monroe, there's a small story about three rabbis walking on the street. And the Orthodox rabbi says, "Ooh, look at that beautiful woman with that kind of not so beautiful man. Who are they?" The conservative rabbi says, "Oh, that's Arthur Miller and Marilyn Monroe. You know, they're married." The Reform rabbi says, "It won't last more than 12 months." And the Orthodox rabbi says, "Oi, I should have such a year." Oi, I should have-
Can we pass that along? Do you mind?
It wasn't mine. I heard it from somebody, you know.
Well, I'll say a guy in our book club introduced us to this joke.
That's
We'll attribute it.
so I should have such a good. Okay, that's all. That's all I've got.
Have to hear
So-
from Ben.
So to add a little bit of spice, I'm going to be a little bit contrarian. With
Gee,
this.
really?
As is your want.
I kind of enjoy doing, but I don't like going with the flow, so I'm going to emphasize a little more against the flow.
Okay.
I tried to remember, I actually did read this, and I don't remember actually seeing it live. But I reached back, and I'm pretty sure I was fortunate to take a play script reading or play reading class at the American Repertory Theater with Robert Brustein. So I'm pretty sure that we read this along with a bunch of others. Overall, to be honest, it didn't seem to stand the test of time for me that well. I found it a little bit maudlin, but let me just say, I did admire many things, including the set design, dialogue, complexities, because it didn't just go from, it's a cautionary tale about the American dream, but it's not just a kind of a political rant or screed. It's also quite a difficult family psychological portrait. So I admire its complexities, but I have to be honest that it's due to its title, there was no suspense at all for me. Right? You could tell almost from the first page that Willie is going to kill himself. And so in that sense, it's just a kind of an inevitable grinding through of how it's going to happen. And so that kind of took a little bit away from me. I mean, it's a little bit as though Arthur Miller had, he uses drama in the service of an end or even in service of some tendaciousness. So anyway, I just want to throw out that I'm sure I loved it when I first read it years ago. I'm a little, the bloom of the flower is off for me.
Well, there was a little hint of what was going to happen in the title too, if you noticed.
That's what I said. There was no
But that didn't spoil it for me.
No,
I knew what threw you off. It was the use of words like simonize. You thought it was dated because of that.
Yeah,
I tried to imagine a 16 or 18 or 28 or even 35-year-old knowing what simonize was.
I had never read it before. This was my first time, which is why I suggested it. And those words didn't bother me at all.
Yeah.
I absolutely loved it. I thought the way that he described the different psychology of each person and really honored them, and the complexity of Biff wanting to do what his father wanted, but wanting something else and not knowing what was right and being torn in both directions and trying to get his father's love and being pissed off at his father at the same time, and all of those emotional components. I find it rare that you have a political text that's very emotional on a family dynamic kind of level. And there are just so many levels to this. I, like you used the word blown away. I was blown away. I immediately went and watched the movie. We can talk about the movie later. I saw the version with Dustin Hoffman and John Malkovich. Excellent. And Charles Turing. And I just saw other things in watching the movie that I not had missed, but maybe hadn't given as much importance to.
Who played Linda in that,
so-
Dory?
I'm sorry?
Who played Linda in that version?
I don't know the name of the actress. It wasn't someone I knew from before.
Okay, I thought you might.
She was excellent. All the actors and actresses were excellent. But I can't remember her name. I didn't know her.
Can you see the cover of my ebook, I think, has Dustin Hoffman and maybe the rest, but I don't know who it is.
Oh, I can't see it well enough to tell.
Okay, sorry.
But more things came out, and I'm sure that if I read it again and again, I would find other parts that would all of a sudden stand out to me. So I just absolutely adored it. And I felt like, yes, it was a Greek tragedy, but he was like killing himself for all the right reasons in a way. He was killing himself not only because he was a failure in my view, but he was doing it for his family. Like he really believed that $20,000 of the life insurance policy was the best thing he could do for his family. And it was the love of family that also propelled him. So there's so many levels. I just adored it. So maybe shall we go around and see does anyone have a favorite part they want to read? Mark read something, but does anyone else?
I've got a line that I loved. Willie, towards the end, I believe, I'm always in a race with the junkyard.
Oh my God.
Aren't we
I'm
all?
gonna turn my light on because I can't see.
I had one line that I liked, and somewhat a personification of what Death of a Salesman is all about, where Willie is talking with Charlie, and Charlie says, talking to him, he said, "The only thing you've got in this world is what you can sell." And Willie didn't have anything left to sell.
Yeah.
His life.
Yeah.
His life, exactly.
And like what you were saying, Doreen, about how he was doing it for his family, I cannot escape thinking that the whole plot fell flat, that the insurance company refused the payout, and he was a loser again.
He's a loser.
Well,
yeah.
as a person who's been in the insurance business, I want you to know that the suicide clause is only good for 2 years. He's been paying that a lot longer, so he's allowed to kill himself. So everybody feel good about Willie's act.
What about at the end where they give him like his buddy, what's his name, Charlie, gives him the $110, and then he almost blows it at the club, and the waiter sticks it in his pocket, and you don't really know, did he ever pay the premium? Like maybe he didn't pay it.
I read in the introduction of my version that one of the titles that he had considered as an alternative to the morose Death of a Salesman was A Period of Grace. And the play on that is the fact that insurance policies don't lapse right away. They enter a period of grace in which they're still honored.
No, they're not. They're not during the period. No, they're not honored.
They can be repaid. You can pay them off.
Yeah, but you got to pay them off before you die. But yeah, it's an interesting point. I hope he did pay it. I hope he did pay it. But we'll never know, because I don't think the sequel ever came out.
There's no way he could have. It was after hours. He had just gone to the hardware store for seeds. He came home. He was planting.
Interesting.
I know both Miller and Monroe are both dead, so we can't find out.
Yeah. Uh,
I have a
This-
passage I like a lot. This is from Biff. He's been up in the office and he's stolen the pen.
Oh,
And he says, I ran down 11 flights with a pen in my hand today. And suddenly I stopped. You hear me? And in the middle of that office building, do you hear this? I stopped in the middle of that building and I saw the sky. I saw the things that I love in this world, the work and the food and time to sit and smoke. And I looked at the pen and said to myself, what the hell am I grabbing this for? Why am I trying to become what I don't want to be? What am I doing in an office making a contemptuous, begging fool of myself when all I want is out there waiting for me the minute I say I know who I am? That's really a marvelous speech, and it is against this American idea that you have to work until you practically kill yourself or you kill yourself. And that is what success is. You have to be a striver. And here Biff is saying, all I want to do is look at the sky and have a smoke and be who I am. And I think it's absolutely wonderful. And that Miller understands this. But if you say that to anybody, well, what are your goals? You know, you have to have goals. You can't say, well, what are you going to do with your life? I'm going to smoke. I'm going to have a smoke and I'm going to look at the sky. It's so un-American, right? Completely
well,
un-American.
unless you're talking about a cowboy out on the
Unless maybe
on the
you're
plain.
not a cowboy or something, but I don't
Right.
think Biff is even saying that. He's just saying, he's saying here, I just want to be.
Well, it's kind of interesting, going back to the book written by Arthur Miller. He said something, he said, I still feel kind of temporary about myself, Willie Loman says to his brother Ben. And then this is Arthur Miller saying, I smiled as I wrote that line in the spring of 1948, when it had not yet occurred to me that it summed up my own condition then and throughout my life. That he himself felt temporary as to where was he, what was it all about? And that, I think in the line there that Biff is, he's manifesting that as well.
Hmm. Did anybody else think about comparisons? Not easy to make, but somehow, especially what you were talking about, Doreen, about family relationships with Eugene O'Neill. Kind of, I mean, they're a different plane because those characters are much more sophisticated, but ideas that and the relationships are really, they're comparable. They're not identical, but I thought the dynamics are sharp, like they are in both playwrights. They kind of hurt when people say things and do things that are painful, and it just
I'm not
made me
familiar with
back to the
O'Neill.
play. No,
What did he write? Excuse my ignorance.
but
Long
Does
days
that-
early into night.
that's the one I was thinking of mostly. Desire Under the Elms, didn't he write that too?
Yeah.
Iceman cometh.
Iceman.
Iceman Cometh.
Emperor Jones, isn't that his too?
Oh, yeah.
Did
Anyway,
anyone else want to comment on that aspect with the comparison? Because I can't.
I would need to reread. I wouldn't mind doing plays more.
I think
Because,
it's a great
but I
idea.
haven't read O'Neill's plays in a long time.
By the way, you were discussing the staging, and I picked up an old copy of Death of a Salesman at a used bookstore just on the trip, and it was staged, the original version, by Elia Kazan.
Right.
And it's the cast was Lee J. Cobb, and Biff was played by Arthur Kennedy, and Hap was played by Cameron Mitchell. Pretty good cast there also. I mean, there were these other actors.
And Mildred Dunnick played Linda too.
Yes, Yes, I don't know who she is, but that's who played her.
And
Does
also,
anyone else?
Joe Malzahner was very famous, and he did the set design.
And
Ben-
interesting, Cobb was only about 32 years old when he played the part.
Say it again.
Cobb was only about 32 years old when he played the part.
I think he was 46.
I think I can check real quick. I'll tell you.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah.
But so-
What are we looking at, Miriam?
This is the cover with Lee J. Cobb. I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
He was in the original film version too, wasn't he?
Yes.
Mhm.
Ben, did you have a part you wanted to read?
Who are you asking?
Ben?
Oh, I did. I read
Ben.
I'm always in a race with the junkyard.
Okay.
I've got
Okay.
some others, but I'll wait for the right question for it.
Right moment.
Yeah.
I had actually, if I had just picked a speech, which I didn't, it would have been the exact speech that Miriam chose. I thought that was like, ugh,
Yeah.
Wrenching.
it's
Just
really
wonderful.
touching.
Yeah, very touching. Very touching.
if you ever get a chance when you're reading a play, I enjoyed, I read about half of it out loud. And I did different voices. You know, I was entertaining myself and my 10-month-old grandson, who loved the play, by the way. He thought my voices were terrific. He truly, he enjoyed each one of my voices. He enjoyed when I did Linda probably more than anyone else. He couldn't
Well,
join
it's
us.
going beyond multi-generation.
You're funny.
I hope so. I hope so. You know, death is, we have to approach it with a certain kind of, I don't know, smile, I guess. I mean, what are you going to do? What are you going to do?
So, the American Dream, what do you think Miller is saying about it? Because you have Biff's vision, you have Happy's vision, you have Willie's vision. They're not all the same. What do you think he's trying to say
Well,
about the American Dream?
Willie's version in some ways is treated ironically because it's an illusion. So for instance, here's another fabulous, this is Willie's dream and has to do, it's all tied up with a lot of it with his sons. He's putting down Bernard, and in the end, Bernard is going to be arguing a case before the Supreme Court. But he puts down Bernard as a kind of nebbish, right? And then he says, when you go out in the world, you're going to be 5 times ahead of him. That's why I thank Almighty God you're both built like Adonises. Because the man who makes an appearance in the business world, the man who creates personal interest, is the man who gets ahead. Be liked and you will never want. You take me, for instance, I never have to wait in line to see a buyer. Willie Loman is here. That's all they have to know. And I go right through. So this notion of, this is sort of like a dress for success in a way, but somehow or other this a personal charm, what you look like, it's sort of Dale Carnegie. What was the big
How to
selling-
win
To
friends
live
and
well and influence people.
and how to influence people or something like that. It was a tremendous.
How to live well, I think it is.
Yeah, how to, and influence people. Dale Carnegie, and this was a tremendous bestseller in this country. So that's Willie's idea, and it's well, the interesting thing in
But they called him a shrimp. They didn't like the way he looked.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
Right. But in the Greek world, the world of the ancient Greeks, this kind of tremendous appearance, what you looked like, your deeds, But in that world, you had to be a hero. You know, the people who were honored in this way were godlike, and very often the stories attached to them would be the mother was a goddess or the father was a god, and they were elevated into this fame that was supposed to live after them, and it did. It did. Well, in a sense, Willie is talking about some things, but he's attaching this dream to two sons who cannot possibly live up to it. And the
Yeah.
one son who could have, Biff, who had athletic talent, uh, was the son that was terribly disillusioned when he saw that his father was with another woman, and he then really basically became a thief. He stole his way out of every job he was ever in. And he never went to summer school to earn those points so he could go to college and
Right.
achieve, you know, um, what Willie wanted him to do, and to distinguish himself and to rise above, and all of those things. So on that sense, he was a failure. But so what is the American dream? On one level, you could say the American dream is to come from nothing and to achieve great success. So we have Ben, who walks, I love the African part. He walks into Africa at 18. He comes out at 20,
Penniless.
right? Well, you know, rich, 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 rich. So that's part of the American dream too, to, you know, make money, 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 money. When I went through this book this time, I put a dollar sign next to, in the margins where money was mentioned, and it's everywhere. It's so, so important. So important.
But money is part of the American dream.
Oh, of course, it is. People worship the, you know, the lifestyles of the rich and famous.
no, but it's not just the rich and famous. You know, Willie, for all of his failure, he raised a family. They never went hungry. He paid his mortgage off. They lived a life. He took them places. His dream was to raise his family, and he gave up a lot because it was clear that he, for all his talk about being a salesman, he was happiest with his hands. At the end, when he was, you know, when they were describing him, you know, he built cement. I mean, he built things with cement. He built this, he built that.
Planting the seeds.
You know, yeah, exactly. And so if he was a failure, it was only that he wasn't true to himself. So, but the American dream doesn't promise an easy life. It promises hard work and reward. And Bernard lived the American dream. It doesn't make him a nebbish. It doesn't make him a bad person. It does, you know, and Charlie, that, you know, what struck me was Charlie's speech at the end, when he kind of interrupts Happy and says to Biff, nobody blame this man. You don't understand. Willie was a salesman, and for a salesman, there is no rock bottom to the life. He don't put a bolt to a nut. He don't tell you the law or give you medicine. He's a man way out there in the blue, riding on a smile and a shoe shine. And when they start not smiling back, that's an earthquake. And one of the things that's kind of changed in this world is that there is less interaction between people. You know, we're on Zoom right now, but that's situational. But if you're in business now, you have much less interaction with people, and not just because of the COVID, but because of the speed. People don't have the time to interact. You know, I've experienced in 50 years practicing law, you know, where you have carbon paper, and then there was Federal Express, and then there was email, and now nobody reads email. You got to text them. Nobody talks on the telephone. Nope, forget about meeting. I do deals sometimes, and we never even meet each other. Everything is done by paper. So there's less personal There's less personal. I don't failure maybe. He also believed in people. He didn't think that this guy was going to throw him on the street. I mean, what he asked for was reasonable. He just wanted a little dignity. He got taken advantage of, but a lot of people do when they don't own something, and they're just, they use an expression, you don't eat the orange and just throw away the peel. And I've said to many people, be careful that they don't squeeze all the juice out of you and then throw you away. But the American, you got to be smart in the American dream. If that sounds cynical, I think that's the way business runs. He chose to be in business.
I thought that whole example was weak. I mean, everyone peels the orange and eats it and throws away the peel. That's what we do. It's not like you're right. If they squeeze all the juice out of you, that's something else. But this is what people do, and it was an illusion to think that people wouldn't do that.
I remember when I had a certain job and I had to administer people and whatever. And someone who was very skilled in business advised me. He said, an organization will take everything that they can get out of you unless you yourself set some sort of limits. And what we have with that's the scene is a magnificent scene with Howard. Willie's going in there, talking about his past, talking about loyalty, talking about his years of service. And Howard said, this is business.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
this is business, and he's fired. That's the end. That's the end of his career. But, the thing about Willie is, on one level, he's living in a world of illusion, particularly about his sons, particularly about himself. And he's the one who thinks that Bernard's a nebbish. Arthur Miller doesn't, we don't. But it's Willie who judges by the way people look and whether they're liked or not.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, here's a wonderful, again, this is Willie's illusion. This is in Act 1. He's talking about Biff, again, the classical reference, like a young god. Hercules, something like that. And the sun all around him. Remember how he waved to me right up there from the field with the representatives of 3 colleges standing by, and the buyers I brought, and the cheers when he came out. Loman, 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 God Almighty, he'll be great yet. A star like that, magnificent, can never really fade away. Now, what is it to call your son godlike? So this is Willie's illusion.
Yeah,
and that's
I totally agree.
That's what he longs for. He wants this sort of transcendent Hercules, godlike son.
Their dreams of their American dreams are not really the American dream. These are almost parodies. These are fantasy. These are American fantasies, and so they're almost lampoons of the American dream. The one who lives, I agree with Charles. The one who lives the American dream is Bernard.
Is Bernard.
Right.
And so it exists, but it's stretched out into all kinds of grotesque fantasies, and it's really examined from a bunch of different angles because of that.
I think that's why
when you want to say something, Jay?
Question. Well,
and
sorry, Bernard, Jay was trying to get a word in.
Yeah, go ahead.
That's okay. I can wait.
Go ahead.
No, I just think there were 2 other things that came across to me. And one of them, going back a little bit to Arthur Miller, and I don't say this in a pejorative way, but basically Miller was somewhat of a communist and somewhat of a socialist. And I think not only was he talking about a specific family, I think he was also talking about a system. And it was sort of a description of this is what capitalism is all about.
Right.
You squeeze the orange, you get the juice out, you throw the peel away, and that's it. And at the end of the day, what does it leave you with? It leaves you with the last money that you have, going and try to buy some seeds and plant something so that there is something left. And at the end of the day, there isn't anything. It's maybe that's why the play was so successful in Moscow. I'm not sure, but
I do think, yeah, go ahead, Jay.
no, I mean, I think that's why when I was talking about it before, I think it is on so many different levels that, and I think it does make it contemporary, because we're going through the same discussions today about autocracy and democracy and so on, and capitalism, and the Simonizing and all. Yeah, those words need to be updated, but I think the concept of, maybe it's like Alfie, at the end of the day, what's it all about?
You know, I'd
In
like to add in a word there that as I mentioned, I think Miller intended a cautionary tale about the American dream. And I agree with Mark that this is that we have some weird variations of it, but it passes overall for the American dream. And that Miriam said correctly also that Willie himself was living an illusion. And I would say that in some sense, he is representing the American dream. And that the cautionary tale was about where the American dream that was already sliding into pure materialism, where it was going. And so I think Miller was very prescient about that. So I would go even further. He wasn't just living an illusion. I would say Willie was living a lie. The guy was just, in many areas, just not in touch with reality. And living a lie has deep psychological and spiritual consequences. And all of that, I personally think that Miller was working on that. Now, on the idea of this is a criticism of capitalism, yeah, I think on a certain level it is. But I would take it more to a criticism of materialism. We have to remember that Adam Smith, before he wrote Wealth of the Nations, he wrote The Theory of Moral Sentiments. And his idea, which was shared by many of our founders also, is that without a spiritual moral basis, everything goes crazy.
And that philosophy is articulated wonderfully by Happy early in the book, when he talks about thinking, lying hyperbolically to say he could be making all this money and that he was going to be the manager, but the manager just builds a house and then sells it because he doesn't really, what's he doing it for? So yeah, that philosophy is articulated.
And
ironically,
Happy has a quote which I love. Everybody around me is so false that I'm constantly lowering my ideals.
Right.
That could be like at every college campus today, couldn't it?
So when I was reading, the different discussion questions and answers, they were saying that one of the other visions they provide of what is the American dream is sort of the pioneer dream. This idea of America as the American West, where you go and you have the big skies above you, and sort of the cowboy dream. And so there was a juxtaposition, some said in the things that I read, about sort of this urban dream of you make money through business versus the sort of pioneer dream of you go and you have your farm, or you work on the farm and you work with your hands, and how those conflict with each other. And there was like a part of Willie that wanted to be that guy who had the farm, who had the hammock between the trees, who had the garden, right? And he was hemmed in by the city. And then you have Biff, who wants to go out and do that, but he keeps getting called back by his father, who doesn't respect that because maybe it's not respected by the urban people.
And then you have the brother who does it and succeeds. I don't know, when Doreen, when you
Oh, Ben,
quoted,
yes.
you asked the question. Yeah, what do you think Miller is saying about the American dream? Just simply, I took that very literally. And I just had to say, it's an illusion. Because I'm thinking about Willie primarily, and his sons, and his wife, for that matter. Those who subscribe to it, like the American dream, or engage with it, are subject to self-delusion and delusions of grandeur, overestimating their abilities and underestimating or ignoring their weaknesses. Reality and accurate self-assessment are elusive and rare. That's what I felt in response to your question, because I was really looking pretty much at the Lohman men, and possibly Linda.
Well, I think there's another American dream that's in this book too, and that's the family, because they have, in some respects, this idyllic classical family structure, as was mentioned, the house that was lived in all those years, paid off, all the memories there, the husband, the wife, the kids, the living out the glory of their children's accomplishments, and it's perverted by this other American dream, this pursuit of material and economic happiness. So in a sense, the real dream that was right in front of them that they had was spoiled by this fantasy of something more.
But the environment kind of kept encroaching on them too, cutting off the sunlight.
Yeah.
To which
Yeah,
he's making the seeds almost an impossibility.
And that's definitely a theme too, the encroachment on that American dream of all kinds of forces that make it really hard to live that out. But I do think that is part of the American dream, and that they're expressing that in a very visual and profound way in the play. That's what you want to have happen, is you want all this reconciliation to happen for this family. And it doesn't happen, so it's a tragedy. But that's part of the American dream. It's a different dream from Ben's dream of going to the law of the jungle, that capitalist law of the jungle American dream, where you go in, you fight people, you fight them unfairly, you do whatever it takes to win, to come out rich. That's another side of the dream. But I think in a way he's idealizing the more simple dream, not just going out and working on a farm, but the family dynamics as they could have been, were they not warped by all these other lies and fantasies.
I think we shouldn't forget, when we think of the family, that Willie has a woman on the side.
Yeah, he does.
With stockings.
Right.
So
And he's on the road. He's lonely.
that's right. I'm not judging him, but I'm just saying that there's another level, and the family life is not the most idyllic life. So
Theirs is not. I mean, you look at the relation of him and her, where she tries to say positive things and he cuts her out. Shut up, Linda. Stop interrupting me. That was the most difficult part of the book for me to read.
wasn't it? Yeah, he keeps shutting her up.
But he is living a lie for sure.
So I'm not saying they had the idyllic family, but they had the ingredients for it, because she was the most supportive, idyllic mother-wife figure, and yet surrounded by all of these warped versions of male accomplishment and expectation.
She's the most sympathetic, and in the end is really quite poignant, but she's the only one who seemed to have really cared for Willie.
But she was sympathetic, but first of all, like, she's always buying something, and her role in the book so much is like accountant okay, Willie, like get that money so we can pay for the dishwasher, we can pay for the washing machine, we can pay for this. And, we'll get to it. But like at the end, she says, we're free. What does that mean? Like, we're free? He's dead. We're free and clear of the mortgage. Is that what it means? I mean, like, we can talk more, but we're free.
Well,
I
she
think
did spend a lot of time preparing things in the kitchen, knitting and,
Yeah,
Fitting.
knitting the socks is the stockings is a
Right.
recurrent theme.
Fixing her own stockings.
Making
And
do
new
with the limited
stockings to
income.
someone else, and she's stuck at home fixing the stockings and having to clean up the mess and make things last. And, her role was, to me, she felt kind of like an accountant trying to stretch the cash so they can live the American dream, keep up with the Joneses or whatever.
she was paying off the refrigerator.
yeah.
She was, I didn't, it wasn't like she was going and buying, stuff at Neiman Marcus. I mean, I thought she was the one who had a handle on the reality of keeping the household going. I think Miller believed in the American dream, but I think he believed in the American dream in a collective way and not in a, dog eat dog way, although he was in a very competitive business himself. Playwriting is not a non-competitive non-competitive business. And I think he would be appalled at what society has become. Now, we've made improvements. We never had Medicare. We never had Medicaid when he wrote this in 1949. But think about what's happened in the last year and a half. The richest, I don't know, 0.1% has increased their net worth, 1.7 trillion with a T.
Yeah.
And the national minimum wage is $7.45. And I think the only people, and I mean, I include myself, the only people that complain about materialism are the people who are eating and the people who are living in a home. I think poor people don't complain about materialism because they're surviving. They're hanging on by their, it's a luxury to be able to complain about materialism. I certainly didn't find Linda to be a materialistic person, not at all.
And Charles, what you're saying makes me think that we can ask ourselves the question is there anything distinctively American about the American dream as we see it today? I mean, I don't think there is. I don't think there's, I mean, maybe in Sweden, they have a different idea of success. But if you look at most of Europe, and if you look at a lot of South America, I don't know, it seems to me that people are all trying to, make their way somehow. And it doesn't.
I do think there's very different aspects to the American dream.
Tell me what you think.
Our idea of individualism is like extreme. We have, if you look at like, yes, I think it still is. And if you look at our society and all sorts of anthropological, like things that rate societies, how masculine they are, how individualistic they are, how collective they are in their thinking, their how long-term oriented or short-term oriented. The United States is freaking off the charts as individualistic, as masculine, as short-term thinking. Our idea of the family and collective is like way down low. We don't put the collective society anywhere near where Asians put it, where their last name comes first before their first name. Our idea of everybody in this together, my God, look at the vaccines and what's going on and how people, we are off the charts. And the way every society, of course, wants to give decent education, decent housing, et cetera, to their people. Everyone wants to have a decent life. But how you get there and the way we look at it is completely different than any other country that I know, including Europe. We don't want to pay taxes like Europe.
Those are very, very good points, Doreen, I think. Very, very good points.
boy, we can go in a different direction on this one. I think there is a distinctive Americanism, and I think if you talk to somebody who's an immigrant, they will feel very differently about the American dream. The reason they're gathering at the border in Texas,
Mhm.
and that's not just Central Americans. I mean, they're Chinese people and they're people from Pakistan and so on. They feel that this country has something to offer them that they cannot get in the environment that they're working in. And I think when you look at some of the people who have been extraordinarily successful in the United States, and I'm talking about people like Amazon, who is adopted by an immigrant family, somebody like um, Apple, again, immigrant families, that the American environment and dream offers an opportunity which a number of other countries just do not offer. And yes, it is oriented toward individualism, and that's where I think this play is also contemporary. It questions, is the system worth the price? And that's something that I think everybody has to decide on their own, its own merits and their own achievements and their own feeling about it. But I think there is something distinctly American, and some of it's good, some of it's bad. But it certainly seems to attract people like most of our families who came from somewhere else and ended up here. They felt there was something here that caused them to come here.
My father, who was born in Poland and died when I was young, my mother told me, he always said that you can't quite appreciate the United States unless you were born somewhere else. He came here at the age of 14. And here I am, I'm his son. He came here with nothing. I'm not Jeff Bezos or something, but I've given my family a certain lifestyle. And I think that's important. I mean, I don't view myself as materialistic. I view myself as opportunities were given to me. What concerns me about the country is not that people can't succeed, but there's too much spread between the top and the bottom. I think we've got to, I think the American dream includes lifting people up to a certain level. Doesn't require everybody to be equal. It doesn't require, strict equality, but it requires people to have an ability to go to a doctor, to eat right, to have a place to live. If that makes me a socialist, so be it. I'm not worried about it. I'm not a socialist because I love the idea of capitalism, but I think capitalism can be very, very cruel to people who don't have either the ability or don't have the drive, or just are unlucky. They're born with a disease or they're born with a handicap or whatever it is. And to me, that's a great failing of the American dream. It's not that the individual can't rise, it's that the whole system doesn't rise with the individual.
Right.
Political announcement was brought to you by the People for Progress. Thank you so much. Dig deep and give to my cause.
So I'm not sure Miller would laud the American dream. I mean, his vision of it is full of corruption. Everybody's able to sell themselves out. The girls will sell themselves out for stockings or a promise of a night with a football player. I mean, the men sell them, cheat routinely on everything from tests to the thieving and the stealing out of the cash register at the bar. I mean, it just seems like there's corruption in every nook and cranny of this vision. But
well, maybe to get back to the play for a second.
Yeah.
Haffey did have something to say about that when they were talking about Willie Loman did not die in vain. He had a good dream. It was the only dream you can have. to come out number one, man. He fought it out, and this is where I'm going to win it for him. So when we talk about within the context of this play, what's the American dream? It's to be number one, man.
Number one. But you know, I'm interested in the character of Charlie, who doesn't have any dreams. And Miller seems to have a very strong appreciation for a man like Charlie. There's a scene where Bernard is going off. He's played tennis. He comes back to say goodbye to his dad. Charlie says, "Knock him dead, Bernard." And then Willie says, "The Supreme Court," and he didn't even mention it. He don't have to. He's going to do it, Charlie says. Perfect, just perfect. And you never told him what to do, did you? You never took any interest in him.
Well,
And Charlie says, "My salvation is that I never took any interest in anything." There's some money, $50. I got an accountant inside. Charlie's perfect. I mean, it's as if Charlie really knows what's real. He didn't make his son into Hercules, a god, you know, with the sun shining off his golden body. And he never told his son what to do. And he gave his son the room to do what he needed to do for himself and to figure it out, which I think is absolutely wonderful. And, you know, isn't it interesting that Charlie offers Willie a job?
Yeah, I couldn't figure out why Willie turned that job down at that moment in the play.
Right.
That was the only part that didn't ring quite
it's only,
true to
it's
me.
only pride. He just didn't want to admit that the job he had sucked.
Yeah.
He just said he was fired. He admitted he was fired from his job.
And
So
then-
no job. The guy's offering him a job. Why at that point, why doesn't he take it? I don't quite grasp that.
Charlie has a wonderful speech. He says to Willie, "Why must everybody like you?"
absolutely.
You know, wonderful speech. Who liked J.P. Morgan? Was he impressive? In a Turkish bath, he looked like a butcher. But with his mitts on, he was very well liked. Now listen, Willie, I know you don't like me, and nobody can say I'm in love with you, but I'll give you a job because just for the hell of it. Put it that way. Now, what do you say? And Willie says, "I can't work for you." And Charlie says, "What are you, jealous?" He just says, "I can't work for you. That's all. Don't ask me why." And Charlie says, "You've been jealous of me all your life, you damn fool. Here, pay your insurance." So here, without this sort of overblown, you know, I think, is it Biff or Happy says, "You've been filling me with hot air," you know, and
Yeah.
all of that
Yeah.
you know, stuff. You know, it's awful to praise your kids for what they're not. I mean, it's just a terrible injustice. So here's Charlie. Charlie seems to be the realist. I don't like
Yes.
you, you don't like me. Let's just admit that, and I'll give you a job.
Real, honest, fair. And the only reason that Willie can't take it is pride. He does not want to work for somebody who would hire him, because then he'd have a boss. And he thinks of himself as his own boss, even though he has a guy who fired him from his sales job. So it's just delusional, you know?
I think the idea of dream versus reality is a really interesting one. And if we go back to the very first set directions, first paragraph, and I think Miller was brilliant in this. I do want to add one thing. Reading the play, I think, loses some because the music and the lights, it's a lot of atmospherics, but my guess is that they actually add a lot of emotional depth. So just reading the words and whatnot. But Miller says something super interesting. I think it's maybe in the middle or towards the end of the first paragraph, or beginning. An air of the dream stings to the place. A dream rising out of reality. What? So first of all, it's like, isn't that inverted? A dream rising out of reality? But then maybe what he's getting at is just that that Willie has a dream that's completely untethered from reality.
Right.
And if you think of, I prefer to think of the American dream, it's become completely materialist. And in that sense, it has joined dreams of any nation, let's say. But I would say the individualism is along the lines of what Miriam said earlier about Biff, that Biff, it's rising to your potential. And that can be materialistic, but can also be not materialist. It can be spiritual, it can be whatever. But that it could even be, looking at the sky, if that's what your potential is, and enjoying a smoke. And that seems to be, anyway. But this is interesting because he's right up Miller, putting it right in that very strange set direction, which when I read it didn't make any sense at all. An air of the dream dings to the place, a dream rising out of reality.
Well, I think he's talking about this dreamlike reality, but the set is supposed, in some ways, to be realistic. I think that's that's what it's all about. I think it's interesting also to think of life. I found it really, really interesting to learn recently that Miller applied to college. I forget which one it is. And he was rejected. They wouldn't let him in. So what did he do? It was either the following year he wrote to them and he asked to be reconsidered, and they admitted him. And with the stipulation that if he could show that he could support himself and pay certain bills and everything, that they would admit him to school, which they did, and he did well, and then they offered him a scholarship. Well, I thought that this was so interesting. Tenaciousness and his pluck to ask to be reconsidered. I thought it was marvelous. This is Arthur Miller that we're talking about here,
Is that the University of Michigan?
Yes. Yeah.
And maybe that explains why he is so good to the university after, and there's buildings named after him, and he gave so much to the university.
Yeah. So,
and this is another way that individualism can be seen, yes, as American, but also rare. I mean, here's somebody who did it on his own and was turned down and then came back and tried again and succeeded.
Yeah.
That's what I consider to be a real valuable American dream kind of thing, is that persisting and succeeding, not continuing to fail.
But that's not unusual. I mean, that is generally the biography of a success, no matter whether it's material or artistic.
When we're talking about this big divide in terms of the 1% and everybody else, and the inescapable or impossible to cross chasm, that's what is called for here, is for somebody to be able to kind of climb out of that. And that doesn't happen with any regularity that I think hits the charts.
Oh, I disagree. I mean, you look at the level of, I mean, I think that I think as a society we fall short, but the American dream is alive and well for many, many people. It's just it's not the American dream should include a minimum standard. That's what I've always thought of as the American dream. It's I never thought of it as an individual. But I guess, I
think that's the problem I'm having. The problem I'm having is that I really have a problem with the American dream. I detest it because it is American exceptionalism at its worst. And it denies the possibility that this kind of ambition or anything can be anything but American. And I just don't like it. And I think it's claiming a whole type of personality and activity that is exclusively American. It's American exceptionalism. And we got to get beyond that if we're going to move the rest of the world and this country, I think.
Doreen,
We are e pluribus unum after all. So the idea is of all those individuals, you do unite to in some direction. But anyway.
Well, the idea, that's on the coins, but is it a reality? Is there really one?
I suggest we try and maybe move on to some of the other points, because we could talk about the American dream the entire time, and it has so many levels, which is the beauty of the book, right? So what about this one? Willie says, be liked and you will never want. Later, he says, people don't seem to take to me. How important is the role of likability and appearance in the play? Miriam touched on this.
Yeah,
How-
Charlie says, why do you have to be liked? Was JP Morgan liked? Willie thinks it's very important what you look like, whether people like you.
Well, he's in sales.
Yeah, he's in sales. You know,
And in sales, that's, there's some truth in that.
But nobody likes him. Nobody comes to his
no
funeral.
one goes to his funeral, right? No one goes.
The
to
other guy he talks about, right? The other salesman who was his mentor, like hundreds of people supposedly went to his funeral, right?
Yeah,
He could pick up a phone and call anyone, and then nobody came to his funeral, even Howard.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's again, his illusion of what he thinks he is and what he actually is.
yeah.
It's so sad.
We did
means
like
it is-
that
it is
setup
sad.
of death of a salesman, the actual use of the line death of a salesman in regard to this fantasy of his. It was a pretty super setup.
And I guess it shows that you can die of 1,000 cuts, that it's not just one thing that didn't work out for him. His relationships didn't work out for him. His job didn't work out for him. His sons didn't work out for him. And it goes on and on. So little by little, things kill the man who became the death of a salesman.
what does Emerson say? Most men live lives of quiet desperation.
Yeah.
You know,
That's Henry David Thoreau.
is it? I thought it was Emerson. I thought it was
No,
Emerson.
They were buddies.
Oh, no, I know.
You know what just occurred to me, and tell me if I'm completely out of my mind. Death of the salesman maybe doesn't mean Willie Loman. Maybe it's the death of the idea of a salesman. Like the idea of a salesman is just a ridiculous idea. What are you selling?
Right.
Right? You're not creating something. Like maybe he's saying, like you were saying, he's good with his hands. Maybe what's important is to create something, not to sell something. So this illusion that you can get ahead just by selling and not creating, maybe that's what he's referring to on another level. It just struck me when you said that it may not just be him. It's like the death of sales as a way to get ahead. The death of a salesman as,
Yeah.
as
I think it's making sense.
his raising likability to sort of level of the key to success, when it's a farce because he is not likable, or if you look at the people who came to the funeral, and do his sons really respect him, all these things, and it kind of gets back to then he's just completely unhinged, out of touch from reality. And the question is, does he know who he is? And so he's been living the lie, and in his case, it's an American dream illusion, and he can't get off the train, and he has really no idea who he is until the end. I mean, does he know who he is at the end? But does killing himself, whereas in the death of Ivan Ilyich, he really gets an idea. He repents of what he had done, what his life was like up until that point, and then he seems to get to where he needs to get to. That he knows himself and he knows what's up, what's down. Whereas Willie is kind of pathetic.
Oh,
No, I
yeah.
think it's just that he's run out of options. That's what it is. And options have a lot to do with sales. That's what people decide what they're going to buy. What are my options? And he has options. What is he going to sell? Well, he only sold whatever he was presented to sell, and only in the way he was told to sell it. He couldn't do it on the floor. He couldn't do it. He had to travel. His whole life experience in his work kept diminishing and diminishing until the last option was only to get insurance money so that his survivors could survive.
See, the one who does the best, like Miriam said, is Bernard, and he studied, right? Education is what got Bernard ahead.
Yeah.
And there was never like, oh, I read a book. Oh, I studied this more, right? There was
Yeah, or-
never that. And even
Or summer
Happy,
school.
Yeah.
Couldn't even do summer school. Really?
interesting.
Yeah.
There's a wonderful scene between Willie and Biff when Biff accuses his father. He said, I mean, it's just a remarkable scene. He says, I'm not a leader of men, Willie, and neither are you. You were never anything but a hardworking drummer who landed in the ash can like all the rest of them. I'm $1 an hour. I tried 7 states and couldn't raise it. $1 an hour. Do you gather my meaning? I'm not bringing home any prizes anymore, and you're going to stop waiting for me to bring them home. Then Willie says to Biff, you vengeful, spiteful mutt. Pop,
He hates the truth.
yeah, he says, Pop, I'm nothing, Pop. Can't you understand that? There's no spite in it anymore. I'm just what I am, that's all. And then Biff starts to cry. And this is Miller at his best. Willie astonished, says the directions. What are you doing? What are you doing? Why is he crying? And then Biff says, will you let me go, for Christ's sakes? Will you take that phony dream and burn it before something happens? I'll go in the morning. Put him to bed. He says that to Linda. And then this is Miller. Wonderful. Willie says, Willie is astonished, and he says, isn't that remarkable? Biff, he likes me.
Yeah.
And Linda,
Oh,
Insanity.
Linda says, he loves you, Willie. And then Happy says, always did, Pop. And then Willie says, he cried to me. That boy is going to be magnificent. So here he is. This is just absolutely wonderful that, they have a moment of emotional intimacy. And then Willie does pick up that the boy cares for him in some way. It's all
and then projects on that he's going to be wonderful.
that he's going to be wonderful somehow.
The way they do that in the movie,
Yeah.
so Biff is holding him and crying and hugging him, and Dustin Hoffman is absolutely unable to hug him back. So his hands are out like this, and so Biff is hugging his dad, and the dad has his hands out, and he's unable to hug him back. He's just emotionally unable to connect on any other level than he likes me. He doesn't know love or know how to express love, or it's just remarkable. His hands are out there, and he's like, he can't do it. He can't hug back. Wow.
It's very sad.
I had the great pleasure of seeing Dustin Hoffman on Broadway, and I sat third row orchestra, and he was absolutely remarkable. He was
In this
50
play?
Yes, he was absolutely remarkable. I can't imagine how Lee J. Cobb played it in a play, but it was one of the most memorable evenings I ever had in a theater. I mean, I walked out and I was physically just taken by it so much. And the real truth about American plays is you can't write a play about Charlie. Charlie is not, I like Charlie, but he's not that interesting for a play. I mean, I think Charlie is like a hardworking, reasonable guy who has a pretty good understanding of what the world's about, but he's boring for a playwright. Willie Loman is perfect. He's perfect. You know, he goes off into his dreams. It's believable. You could never believe Charlie was talking to himself. Wouldn't happen. It just wouldn't happen. But Willie, it seems natural he's talking to himself because he's living, you know, he's living in his own world. His whole world is his own world. He's not living in reality. Anyhow, one of the great experiences I ever had. I wish I could have seen Lee J. Cobb, but I was only 1 year old when the play opened, so my mother wouldn't take me, I guess. Whatever.
That you're reading it to your grandson or your great grandson.
Well, I'm trying to get him. I'm trying to get him online. You know, I mean.
Hey guys, here. What does Linda mean when she says in the play's final words, "We're free"? Is she referring only to being free of the mortgage they just paid off, or how can Willie be free?
Free of the torture that he was putting himself through. Free of the torture he was putting his sons through and her. Free of the dark, no progress, no success life, and free to be free from this life. I think she, at that point, don't forget, she had already made a major transformation by telling her sons, get out of this house. Now that was a surprise to me that she actually found this within herself to steel herself to say that. And then after what happens after that, she says, we're free. Made sense to me. She had a realization.
Well, I think that she says it, but we're encouraged to look at it ironically. They're free of the mortgage. She's really talking to Willie. She's free of the mortgage, but it's an awful, awful kind of freedom. I mean, so we look at that ironically, and then of course the whole family is free of him.
Yeah.
She's speaking to Willie. Willie, I made the last payment on the house today, dear, and there'll be nobody home. We're free and clear. We're free. We're free. We're free. She keeps repeating, but she's addressing Willie here. She's speaking to him. And it's an awful, awful irony. He's dead, and she's got these, you know, two sons who aren't going to amount to much. And she has the house and she doesn't have to pay the mortgage.
She has no one to live with. He's dead. The kids she just threw out of the house.
Yeah.
The house is falling apart.
Yeah.
One of the difficulties I have, and I don't know whether it's dated, Linda is such a good woman, you know? She is just so good. And she props Willie up. She tells him he still looks good, that he's still handsome. I mean, she couldn't be more forgiving.
Mm-hmm.
And she kind of buoys him up in his illusions.
We would call her today an enabler.
Yeah, we call her today an enabler, exactly. And
She doesn't even take away the nipple from the gas thing. She takes it and puts it back.
Yeah.
You people are very hard sometimes. I call her a woman of valor. Okay, I don't know if she's an enabler. You know, she's trying to you know, keep them going. You know,
she makes nice, as they say. I have a cousin who said when I'm dead on my tombstone, it should say she tried to make nice.
Oh my God.
not the worst thing. Not the worst thing.
No, it's not the worst thing, but in Miller's view, Linda keeps him going, you know, she just keeps him going. She keeps him going. And
but he doesn't respect her, really.
She keeps him going.
No, but you could almost look at any characters from plays from that period or even decades before, and you see a lot of disrespect. I mean, it's just there. Women are not treated with any kind of respect or equality unless they're, the little foxes in which they're wicked running the show.
Well,
Well-
we have Ibsen, who has his women breaking out of the doll's house.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, yeah. So that was a big, big question. Big-
Well,
Yeah,
next
women
month-
writers. Women
Next month-
writers who often write differently.
Next
But,
month, we're going to have a cheerful book, Homage to Catalonia, about the Spanish Civil War.
Is that,
You know,
is that
uh,
what-
Before we
More
get to
dead.
that, so what about this notion you end up worth more dead than alive? And Charlie says nobody's worth nothing dead. Why do you think Willie killed himself? For the money for his family, or why?
I think he was exhausted and finished.
Period.
And
Period.
He had lost his raison d'etre.
Yeah.
He couldn't work for a living. He couldn't be his own man, make his own way. His sons continued to let him down, and in his view, and he was worth more dead than alive.
it was the only option that had a possibility of some success for somebody.
Language in the book. So some people say low man is low man, the ordinary man. Some people say will he is like Willie is will he do this? I looked up the meaning of the word biff. Does anyone know what it means?
Mm.
It means to,
Means to be fit, I guess, maybe, or
I think that's buff.
buff. You're right. Yes.
So biff means to strike as if with a fist. And you think about Biff's role, like he really strikes Willie right at the heart and says, I'm nobody, you're nobody, we're nobody. So he biffs him, he strikes like a fist.
But not just Willie, I mean, he's violent throughout.
But what a great name for him, right?
Yeah.
And Happy, who's lonely and not happy, even though he has the apartment he's supposed to have, the money he's supposed to have, the women he's supposed to have, he's anything but happy. So I guess the question is like language, what did you think of his use of language?
Didn't occur to me that Willie had anything to do with will he or low man with a low man. I don't think that's something men do. It just doesn't, it didn't occur to me anyway, as a possibility until you introduced it in the questions.
I think Lohman, I think that's a good interpretation because the classical definition of tragedy is that you have to, the tragic hero has to fall from a high place. So all the Greek tragedies have kings and queens who die. And Miller defended Lohman. I think Miller could have been thinking about that. He even wrote an essay, asking the question whether Willie Lohman was a tragic hero.
He did fall from a high place. He fell from the heights of fantasy down to the reality of the grave. I mean, that's a pretty big distance he travels.
Right, and the other, classical definition of the tragic hero is that he suffers from an intellectual mistake, a lack of understanding, and that's so true of Willie. He doesn't really know what's what.
The way we pronounce Loneman, it's actually almost closer to lone man.
That's good too. Yeah.
So just to throw that in, it's like.
Right.
And one thing I did appreciate about Miller's treatment of Willie is that it reminded me of what was called the forgotten man back in the Depression era. And remembering that Linda at one point says, attention must finally be paid to such a person.
Yeah.
Right. So she's talking about Willie, of course, and then I assume she's speaking for the playwright.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so you know that there's a certain bringing out of the shadows of a low salesman,
Yeah.
and turning him into a tragic hero to a certain extent.
It's what Carol Lombard tried to do in that movie, The Forgotten Man, with Cary Grant, who's like, living on the ash heap of life.
I'm not familiar.
It's a good movie.
Kids, I gotta go. Thank you so much, Doreen. Great job. Thank you.
Thank you. Charles, are you
Thank
leading
you.
next time? Who's leading?
I'm leaving now.
And
next
week
week,
next week.
Next week, next month, I'm leading
Oh, good.
on,
Homage to Catalonia.
yes.
There's no death in that book, correct?
No, it's all cheery. It's very cheery.
the way, Charles.
Absolutely. No, it's a million laughs. Take care, kids.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
so much, guys. I always learn so much from these discussions, and it
I
always
learned-
makes the book so much richer. And I so appreciate the time that we spent together.
Well, thank you,
all.
Doreen. Thank you for
And
leading.
Absolutely.
this was a great choice. I mean,
Yeah,
it's nice to read a play, and that's a really good one to choose.
And I think
So
Mark has a
thanks.
good idea. We might want to think about another play in the next group.
I think that's a great idea.
Yeah,
I
maybe
would love to.
one play in every group of readings or something. But
Yeah.
Happy birthday, Wanda June by Kurt Vonnegut.
sounds good.
So
But no death in it.
Thank you, Doreen, for choosing and for editing and making up such good questions
Aw. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much.
and leading us all. Great,
Thanks,
guys.
Good night.
Good
Stay
night,
well.
all.
Night.
Thank you.
See you in a month, if not sooner. Take care.
Okay, everybody.
Night.
Bye.
Good night.